Howdy, folks. Welcome back to this week's edition of Viva La Cats. I am your host, Justin Hiles. I am accompanied by no co-host today, but we're doing this show solo. So with that said, I'm going to try to make this quick and not monologue for forever. With that said, we are a 1012 network show covering everything Cincinnati Bearcats. So head on over to the 1012 network. Follow them to get all of the rest of the Big 12 coverage and Big 12 shows. And as well, a shout out to our sponsors, Charlie Hustle, for always providing us some vintage merch that looks absolutely beautiful. Going to show you a few good options in the back half of the show here. This week, gotta feel good. Gotta feel good about the Bearcats. Everything is going pretty well. Off to a really, really hot start. And looking like everything that we hoped we would get out of this team. Of course, they did have the win to start the season against Ohio State in that exhibition. Lost the secret scrimmage, so maybe we don't have to talk about it, against Pitt. And then, of course, starting off this past week with a W at home against UAPB. Blowout win 109-54. Everything in this game looked pretty solid. Came out the first half little sluggish, if you ask Wes Miller, a little bit chaotic and undisciplined in the first half, if you ask Wes Miller. But of course had like a 55-32 lead, going into the break. And in the second half, just put the gas pedal down and started going to work. I'm going to dig into a few different things that I really liked about this game, but specifically about the team because, if you weren't there in person, which I wasn't, none of myself, Steve, or Joel were in person for the game against Ohio State. If you weren't there in person, you really didn't get to see this team play yet. This is your first look at all of these new guys, how everything gels together, how the whole system works. And I got to say, pretty refreshing, pretty refreshing. You might have to excuse me for a few brief pauses as I might need water because I'm going to be talking a lot today. But yeah, I think the biggest thing out the gate in this game was just how this team interacts and how this team plays together and the chemistry that they've built through the offseason. Excuse me. Looks like they've made a lot of strides. Looks like they've made a lot of progress. And specifically in a way of sharing the ball, getting open looks, and not necessarily forcing possessions. I think, whether we were playing a really good opponent or whether we were playing a really bad opponent last year, we saw that we forced shots a lot and we put ourselves in some situations that were a bit more, sort of hero ball, isolation sort of play. And at least from what I'm seeing so far, again, it's one game. We're going to try to make as many assumptions as possible and still feel rational. But after this first game, you see that the way that they move the ball around is completely different than what we did last year. You're still having a lot of high screen plays. You're still getting some good pick and roll, but you're also getting a lot of second, third, fourth, fifth, even sixth pass situations where the ball is moving super fast. And it looks like the classic, Pops, Sacramento Spurs. It looks like Golden State moving the ball around on the perimeter. It was beautiful to watch. And those things give me a lot of confidence for what this team can be moving forward. But let's just dig into the specifics. There's a few stats I wanted to list off and go through. We're going to try to stay mostly to the script and just kind of unpack it. So some of the key stat lines that I found in this game, assists, huge thing. Like I just mentioned, you're moving the ball around a lot. It's really aggressive in that mentality and how you basically create, again, open shots in situations that I think last year somebody's going to try to force that situation. And instead you're getting that third pass. And if it's not there, you're kicking it again. It's going in and out of the post, going down to the paint. It's coming out. There's so much drive and kick and perimeter movement that this team can be really, really high tempo and can be really flashy. But again, if you find those open shots, you got to feel really confident about this team. And that's just my biggest takeaway out of everything. 27 assists, looked very impressive there. Not even, it doesn't matter what your opponent is. If you're moving the ball like that, it's great. One of the other big things here, 50% from three, you saw a lot of good choices on the perimeter, of course, coming again from those extra passes and giving you some better open looks. I think everybody looked pretty solid in this game. There may have been one or two questionable shots, but overall, I think everybody was making the right choice when they had the ball in their hand. And especially in the second half. I think first half, there were some jitters. Even Jizzle, I think, was trying to force some shots. But I think by the time they settled in at the half and got moving, things went a lot better. 17 offensive boards, 48 rebounds, which is just insane. I actually looked this up because I was curious of where the Bearcats would sit as far as rebounding goes thus far into the season. They'll be pretty good. They'll be pretty darn good. Last year, believe we were a top 2 team in offensive rebounds and rebounds overall in the Big 12, beat out by only like Houston offensive boards and BYU as total boards. But that's the thing I think this team is going to hang their hat on. That's something I think we feel really confident about and getting after it. Wes said it in his post-game presser that, and CMOS as well, doubled down on that, saying specifically, like, if there's a 50-50 ball, it's going to be 100% Cincinnati. And that's some good math, some good, simple math that I like to hear. So loved hearing that out of it. A lot of hustle in this game. You saw some guys diving on the floor. There was that one possession where it got loose. I think all but maybe one of the guys on the floor hit it and got back up, kicked it out to Jizzle, drove in, and, got the little floater in there. And great bucket. It's those kind of hustle plays. Those are the things that Cincinnati loves. Those are the things that we find as a foundation for this team and the way that we play. And you're seeing it already, game one. And that's awesome. Even in a blowout, they're up by like 35 and they're getting after the ball like that. It's really, really nice to see. 10 steals, 7 blocks, 9 turnovers, staying really clean with the ball in a game like this. First half, I think, was the majority of some of that sloppiness, as you would expect. And we saw this a lot, I think, even from some of our games last year where we're kind of a one-half team. There weren't a whole lot of teams or a whole lot of games last year, especially when you get into the conference play, where it felt like they got really into it full stop, first 20 in the last 20 minutes. One, I think, has always been kind of dominant for us. This team, though, just, like I said, put the pedal down in the second half and stayed greedy with the ball. Really love to see that there. Also, good discipline in this game, 12 fouls. Nothing too much. It's about in line with what we did last year, average-wise, and I would expect to see that continue. And then the other big thing here, 24 points off of turnovers. That's an absolutely lovely number. Just perfect. You want to see more of that transition. We've got a really stout defense. That's going to be one of the things that actually, we're looking to try to stay in the top 30 overall this entire season. I think offense is definitely going to be a key part of that. The defense, I think, is what's going to make the biggest jump here. And it's really going to rely on some of the guys down low, like Mitchell and Aziz and Page, and Skillings and Day, and just trying to be scrappy and trying to get some of those extra possessions. And if you can make some of those points off of turnovers, it's going to translate into being really good, really, really good. With that said, I think the key things that carried over from last year, you are going to be an elite rebounding team. No question about that, especially offensively. That's going to be huge. When you got a guy like Dan Skillings, who's just going to be all over the floor. I'm giving him this nickname because it's just, if you watch him play, it's the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. That is Dan Skillings. Dan Skillings is just always around. You don't like, he could be on the 3-point line, but he will get that rebound in the paint in about half a second. You will not even see it coming. And it's impressive. He was really active in this game. Got a handful of rebounds. Love to see that. And here's the one thing that's going to be a conversation point of this game. It's me. You're going to hear Joel and Steve talk about this later on through the season, and it'll be fine. I'm going to harp on it because I've harped on it every single season that we've done this podcast for however long. Free throws, figure it out. It's the easiest part of the game. Get it under control. 13 for 23 in this game. I don't care if it's blowout. I don't care what it is. Make those shots. Make those shots. Like it's, you look at so many of our games last year and our piss poor free throw percentage. We were second to dead last in the Big 12 last year. I believe it was like 13 or 16 games decided by less than 5 points. Free throws matter. Free throws really matter, and you got to get that stuff together because, even if you're playing a team like UAPB where you're going to blow them out by 55 points, eventually you're going to have to play a Xavier. You're going to have to play a Dayton. You're going to have to play a Villanova. Some of these tougher teams in your non-conference, and those free throws might get the better of you. But this game, everything else went pretty much to plan, so can't complain there. With all that said, I did a bunch of diving into the team as a whole and basically what I like from this game. I'm going to talk about the players because there's something fun going on here. Like this team is going to get really interesting this year. There's a lot of different lineups that we're going to see, I think, as the season goes on. And I think everybody's really capable of getting some solid minutes in a way that, I think a lot of teams get down to their 8-man rotation by the time you hit conference play, which I do actually have as my next point later on in the show of how does this roster shake out by December. This is the big thing for me. How do you sort this? How do you sort these guys out? I think it's going to be really interesting. I think the balance of so many really capable guards, so many capable 2s and 3s, I think is going to be really tough to try to get everybody minutes and keep everybody happy. However, knowing Wes, knowing how bought in the guys are to this program, I'm hoping and really thinking that this much talent, you've got a monster of a roster here that could really, really make a good run. And you just got to keep everybody on the same page, and going to have to keep some people happy, but we'll see how that shakes out. With that said, this game, Jizzle James bursting onto the scene. Absolutely loved how he played in this game. Again, like I mentioned earlier, kind of had some first half, like just peppiness, just really wanted to get after it, really kind of, like I said, forcing some shots. And then he settled in, 10 assists on this game, and it was great. 10 assists, 1 turnover, which is just huge. I think what you can expect from him going forward, which so much of last year was about him getting in the game, injecting some offense, and it's like, why is he getting taken out? Now I think he's going to have that starting role. He's going to be your primary go-to guy. He's going to have to play more of the point guard this year than he did last year. I think Day-Day is going to come in and give you that great defense. He's going to give you a different element of the one spot, but I think Jizzle's really going to have to start distributing the ball more. And clearly in this game, he showed that he has a very, very high skill level and understands how to do it, especially with just his ability to drive and kick, which you're seeing a lot of in this game as a whole, as a team, but specifically for Jizzle. Excuse me. Ooh, lots of talking. Like I said, with Jizzle in this game, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, 5 rebounds, 7 rebounds. Good Lord, I can't count. Very active in this game. And that's exactly what you want to see out of him going forward. He gives you a similar type of hustle and just sort of dog mentality that you get out of Dan Skillings, but a totally different type of ball game. You know, his sort of like step back, his little fader, those elements of his game I think are really nice. And he's not as much of a slasher as he is, of course, given his size, but not as much of a slasher, but gives you a really different element where he can create his own shot. And that's huge. I think you also have that with CMOS, but you have so many different guys that can do this. And you need somebody to be that central point. And I think Jizzle is going to do a really good job of that. And also, you know, in this game had a nice, fun buzzer beater right at the end off the pass from, I think, Skillings, just to seal it, which felt really good. So a lot of fun there. Moving on to CMOS. Put a lot of buckets in this game, was really good at finding the extra pass, was always available in that sort of spot up, you know, catch and shoot spot. Of course, still a sicko, still an absolute sicko. Like when you watch him dribble this ball out on the perimeter and just like he needs an inch, not even an inch of space. Like he could get mauled and he's still going to drain a three, and it's awesome to watch. Just a knockdown shooter, and it's really, really good to have him there. And talk about some more knockdown shooters too. Aziz and Mitchell, I think, is a really interesting combo on the floor. And I'll dig into Mitchell here a little bit more in a second. But when it comes to offenses that we're going to play, these guys are going to be an absolute nightmare. They are going to just smother teams. You have two really lanky guys with a lot of athleticism, and a desire to play gritty defense. You love to see it. I think Aziz looked great in this game with his defensive presence. Mitchell, of course, as I'm going to crack into, like, the dude's just athletic. I mean, I watched some of his highlights from Texas. Of course, watched him in the game against Cincinnati last year. The dude is an athletic freak. I think we have a real gem in Dylan Mitchell, and I'm super excited to see what this guy can become here in Cincinnati. The thing that I find really interesting that I saw a lot in this game, which is an element that felt very missing from last year. You kind of had it for a little bit in the front half when Vic was, doing really well and was playing pretty successfully, getting a lot of minute load share, was the focus, I think, of a lot of our offense. Mitchell's doing the same thing, but different. Whereas Vic played, and Aziz is this way too, but plays really up in your face, but a face up shooter to the basket. Mitchell is a driver, and Mitchell is a guy that's going to back down somebody, and he has a really, really good rotation off his hip, super good post control. Those things are huge, and we haven't had that in a long time. I said this last week, and I'll keep saying this about Dylan. His game in the post especially looks really similar to Trayvon Scott, where he can duck right, duck left, do a few little dips and jabs. And if he's not taking a shot, what he does and what he did really successfully in this game was wait for that help defender to come off of the perimeter, wait for that help defender to jump out of wherever he was in his position, and then immediately kicks it out to that guy that help defender came from. You saw that probably like 5 or 6 times in this game. Not everything ended up going in the bucket, but really drew a lot of attention, had just the one assist, but opened up a lot of room on the floor to end up getting a lot of Bearcats points, which I think is going to be a really critical element of his game, in a way that you might not have initially thought, just because of how active he is at the rim. With that said, this dude's going to be a really good rebounder. He's going to be a really good rebounder, especially combining him with Aziz and Skillings on the floor. Those three on the floor at the same time, like, that is your rebounding rotation. And if you're in a end of game situation where you need it, I would feel very confident with those three against any 5 in the nation. I think I feel really good about those odds. Ton of upside. Like I said, really lanky, but he's legit. He's an elite player, and I think he's going to be really physically dominant, in a way that I don't think we've seen a Bearcats player in quite some time. Offensively and defensively, like he's just built large, and he's really athletic, and those are not always necessarily a 1-2 punch. With that said, I just love his attitude too. Big smile. Seems like he has a great heart. Had his head on his shoulders. And I think we talked about this last year a lot. It's like you have some movement with Day Day and Jizzle. You got a freshman in there. You have a lot of young guys. And on top of that, like you have, a couple of vets. And with John Newman on the team too, like he was your primary leader, but he also was not always the most active person on the ball every play. He was going to hustle every play. He was going to try to make something happen, but he was not always like your go-to scorer. He was not your go-to passer. He's not your like distributor. Like he's just kind of doing everything on the floor, which is what you need. But I think having somebody who can hit that takeover mode, having somebody who can distribute the ball well and put everybody else in a really good position to succeed, and has a really good camera presence, has a really good attitude. It is clearly shown the excitement for the program, and has talked so highly of this program going into it, and now consistently does the same now that he's here. The sky's the limit for this guy, and I really think that this is going to be one of the most impactful transfers that we've had since maybe a Kyle Washington. Just an absolute leader, and I'm really excited for him. That's a lot on Mitchell. Like I said, I think this is going to be a really fun roster, guys. Dan, it's more of the same. Put up 17 points in this game. Like I said before, 11 boards, 5 offensive rebounds. The dude just gets after it and knows what to do. And I love seeing that activity. He's just a hustler on every single play. That's what we love to get out of our Bearcats. And it looks like he's running a marathon every time he's out there. Even when he's out of position, he's in position. Like I mentioned before, like just super impressive, but looked really good in this game. Started making some, solid shots and just stays active. And I think you need that type of player, especially when everybody can shoot. Everybody's going to get theirs. Like you need that guy who can play the 1 through the 5. He's not big enough for the 5, but can play the 1 through the 5, can defend anybody. And I think the progression of his defense is really going to determine just how high he elevates based off of last year's performances. But really excited for Dan. Looked good in this game. Rayvon got his minutes second half. I think in the very beginning, he forced it a touch, but he looked really effective when he was out. I think he just had some like excitement and wanted to get out there and shoot. But once he kind of settled in, taking some good shots, taking some open shots, and he's that like just on the edge of the roster guy. You don't know exactly where to fit him in because it is really cluttered at the 2 and the 3. But I think he provides you a good element, like I said, of similar to what Dan is. He's kind of like a Dan Skillings junior or Dan Skillings 2.0. Like he offers a lot that Dan will give you. But he can offer you that off the bench in a way that, Dan's going to have to be that for your starting roster. I think that if he's in that second rotation, if he can make it into that like top 10, top 9, he could be really crucial as just being that active guy who's just kind of everywhere. And if he really focuses on defense, in the same way that we saw Josh Reed have to do that last year, he's going to earn himself some minutes. So excited to see what we can get out of him. And then I got like 2 more that I want to focus on. Real quick, Betsy, freshman, looks like a grown ass man. Betsy is like huge. I knew when you look at the lineups and everything, you look at his size, listed as like 6'8", goes on the court, you expect him to be large. This dude is like physically dominant and looks huge on the court for a freshman. It is just looks like he's been in the monster factory for a few years. Like I'm really impressed with just how his build matches up to the rest of the team and matches up with the opponents. And considering that his game is really versatile from his ability to slash, but also shoot on the perimeter, that's a guy that if you can get him just to continue making some of those really, nice spot up threes, the rest of his game is always going to be there and is always going to fall in line. I think he's going to have a really good ability to to rebound, just given his height and given his size too. But the ability to shoot is huge, and especially when you have a guy that's that large, that's a 6'8", shooter. He's lanky too. He's got long arms. He has an ability to get over just about anyone, and so again, another person that I think in that lineup, I think he really can make that like top 8, top 9 probably, and might find his way into staying in that second rotation as we get into the farther part of the season. Lots of talking, like I said. Sorry. This is the last few points, and then we will move on to West Virginia and our preview of the other game that we got coming up next Monday. And then we are out of here. Connor Hickman, man. I think out of everybody, from what I expected, looking at them on the court, you hear about the excitement in the Ohio State exhibition game. You know that you're getting a really good shooter. You know that you get somebody who's like athletic, but you don't really know exactly what you're going to get. Watching Connor Hickman in this game, oh boy, you got somebody who's got some bounce. You have somebody who is a lights out shooter. I think that he could really like be that sneaky, like getting some heavy minutes when we get into regular rotation of the season. Of course, he's a veteran. He's got some experience, of course, no doubt, coming from Bradley. But this is a huge transfer addition, too. And I think what you get out of him is just another element of having another really, really solid shooter that you can go to, but also somebody who, again, has that ability to drive, has that ability to kick. Is a great passer, great distributor. Like, I think he gives you that. And we saw in this game, because with no Day, of course, he should hopefully be back soon. With no Day, like you need another sort of point guard. You need another person who can distribute the ball. And I think he's going to be that guy. I'm really curious to see how that shakes out between him, Jizzle, and Day, because that's a lot of talent kind of fighting for 1.5 spots, looking at the sort of rotation of the roster. But very, very impressed with what we got out of him so far. Super good shot selection. If I could compare him in one game and just make the most pro NBA comparison, just because it felt like we had Klay Thompson out there or something. Super athletic, super mobile, able to just find a shot, make a shot. And I think between him and CMOS on the court at the same time, that's going to be interesting. You got some really, really, really good shooters. That could be like your 1-2 punch Splash Brothers type combo, just with how good they are of shooting on the perimeter. And he clearly showed that last year. It's not just trying to make a lot of assumptions based on, what this one game is. Like, he is proven to be a very good shooter. And I think having him and CMOS together on the same court at the same time, that could be deadly. That could be really deadly. Having two guys that can shoot like that is going to be huge. So, like I said, he can really work his way into that rotation and be sort of that sixth man. But again, that's kind of a spot that he's going to have to work against and with Day to sort of earn that spot, which maybe he'll get the benefit of the doubt. Day that being that benefit of the doubt, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Basically, the biggest takeaway here out of all this is we have a lot of great problems right now. And you just have so many talented players. It's like, how do you fit all of this in? And this is where I get to where do I at least think that this roster is going to shake out by the time you get to December, more specifically, by the time you get to the shootout. That's sort of our bellwether mark of where this season is going to go. How good this team is going to be. You're going to find that out after that game. And I think that what you can expect, at least from this point going forward, I think the starting five that you got is going to be the starting five. I think Jizzle made it very clear that spot's been earned. Wes, I think, has made it clear enough that spot's been earned for the starting rotation. I don't think you keep all these guys if you don't make them starters. So between Jizzle, between Dan, between CMOS, Mitchell, and Aziz, I think you have your set starting five likely for the entire season. I don't see any of them shifting. There's so much talent there, and each one of them brings an element that, even though you have some really, really good talent behind them, they each bring an element to the game that is completely irreplaceable. And that I think is going to be important to make sure those guys stay healthy. Because even though you can fill in their spot, everybody even on that second line rotation is going to be very different in what they provide you. Even if they have some of the similar traits or some of the similar skill sets. Sorry, folks. Gotta take the occasional sigh and breath of air as I've been talking a lot. Here's what I like too out of this game, as far as combos at least go. Mitchell, Hickman, and CMOS on the court at the same time. I think that's really, really effective because you have somebody who's a really, really good rebounder, offensively, defensively, but especially if you have that offensively and you put in Skillings there too. Let's just say those four on the court at the same time. That could be really interesting because you have a guy who's always active, moving around everywhere. Dan Skillings. You have Mitchell, who's probably going to be driving, if not Skillings, driving into the paint. And then you always have Hickman and CMOS sitting somewhere on the perimeter, and both have the ability to drive, but both are going to probably try to find that 3-point shot before anything else. You got two of those guys available who both have a really, really high clip shooting rate. And then you have two really great rebounders, but two guys who are also a threat, Mitchell specifically in the post. I think that combo of those four guys on the court at one time, that's a really, really good rotation that could be proved to be very effective. And we saw a little bit of it last night. I think there was a few points in the game where they were all on the court at the same time, but I'm excited to see where that goes. Another one too that I thought was really interesting was Aziz and Jizzle. Of course, you're always going to expect your point guard and your center to have some kind of chemistry for the plays, but I feel like Aziz always just had his head up, watching, looking around for anything that Jizzle was doing. And you saw it in this game multiple times. Just a little alley-oop, I think, looked great, and just being able to jam it down real quick. That's great. And I think those guys are going to be a really good 1-2 punch, especially given their size. But, if Jizzle pushes in and puts up a floater and gets it in, great. If he doesn't have it, Aziz is right there to drop it back in the bucket. And that's really good to have. And they seem to have built a lot of chemistry in the offseason, which is great. I think even him and Day had a lot of that last year too. With that said too, I talked about Dan a lot. He just goes everywhere. There's a reason this guy is your certified starter. Like there's nowhere on any part of this rotation that he feels like he doesn't belong. Like he is just, if you could have a bunch of Dan Skillings on the court at all times, you're winning a lot of games. His ability to just fill in the gaps anywhere and just be present at all points in time, I think is really good. And as long as he hustles really hard, and as long as he's playing that high, high tempo, driving kick sort of game, like you're gonna be in a lot of these games in the Big 12 this year. And I think that it's going to be pivotal just to keep him healthy. All of those things mentioned, like I said, the starting five is super talented. Between Hickman and Day, and then I think what you look at is like you have your starting five, and then you're probably your three behind that would end up being Hickman, Day, and then Page or Betsy. I would imagine it's probably Hickman, Page, and Day, just because you need, another big man to rotate in and out. And Betsy probably gets some more of his minutes, kind of just spread out, but I don't think he's going to get quite the heavy minutes yet, even with his capabilities. I think there's just so much loaded at the front end. He'll get his minutes, but I don't think it's going to be quite what it was. And that also goes, you look at even a guy like Josh Reed, who's probably in your core, like 8 or 9 last year, and I don't even know if he makes the top 11 in this roster. And it's no knock on him. I just think that with what you have, he's probably not going to get a lot of minutes. And he offers you a really good defensive edge to your game. But this is a guy that is very capable, can play in the Big 12, proved he put in some really good minutes last year, buckled down on defense. I think Reed can find his way in, but it probably requires somebody else to be sidelined with an injury or whatever it might be. I think that's the only way that he really finds his way into this roster, quite honestly. And then, of course, what I mentioned before, Jizzle, Hickman, and Day. That 3-man rotation is going to be very interesting. I think you're likely going to see Jizzle get at least 25 minutes per game if he's going to be your starter. And then somewhere between what I would imagine, you probably have to have Jizzle start. You have to have, of course, Dan start at the 2. You're going to have to put Day behind Jizzle, and then you're probably going to have to put Hickman behind Dan. And you're going to have to find some kind of rotation that allows all of them to play, because I think there's a lot of talent in that 3-man group. It's just how do you distribute the minutes? And I think, again, with the way that they're all capable of shooting and offering you a really good game around the cup, I think all 3 of those guys are going to give you a similar sort of output, but different edge. I think Hickman gives you that knockdown shooter that you were expecting from CJ Frederick, that unfortunately, just due to injury and timing with a lot of things, you didn't really get too much out of him. I think he's going to be maybe playing some good minutes for defense, but by the time this roster shakes out in December, I think he's towards the back of the rotation. I just don't see how, with those 3 of Hickman, Jizzle, and Day, that he makes his way in there, even as the 2. I think even behind Dan, I think it's just going to get crowded really fast. Again, great problem to have. But I think as long as you keep 2 of them on the court at all times, or at least one, but if you can keep 2 of them on the court at all times between those 3 guys, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And we saw the combination of Day and Jizzle towards the end of the season last year, and it was electric. So being able to add a 3rd element to that with Hickman, I think is going to be huge. And I'm just really excited for where this goes. Holy hell. I've talked for 40 minutes by myself. This is impressive. I said I wasn't going to monologue, and here we are. But this is what happens when you get me talking about basketball. So I am sorry for those of you who have listened this long. And thank you for listening this long. That's all we got. And that's a lot of preview of what's to come on the season, but also review of one singular game. So thank you for listening thus far. And thank you to our sponsor, Charlie Hustle. Charlie Hustle, always providing some excellent vintage merch. Fantastic tees, great quality, super soft, super comfortable for any wearing occasion. Of course, I have 2 shirts to my right and to my left. The one to the screen left, of course, the Nippert Stadium shirt released earlier this season, looks great, is one of our shirts this week because the Bearcats getting another nooner. We got to start talking about that. Getting another noon game in Nippert Stadium, playing West Virginia this week as they take on the Mountaineers. Excited for that, but a great shirt for an excellent occasion. And then to my right, of course, the Cincinnati Bearcats 1992 finalist, not Final Four, finalist shirt. We bring this up because this team might. I mean, we're talking crazy here, but this team might have the talent that they could maybe make a run and get back. And we were making another one of these shirts with 2024 on it instead. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh, always giving us great gear. And, we're really excited to see what else they put out for us before the end of the year. I'm hoping we can get another 1 or 2, maybe. Getting excited about that. But with that said, make sure to use the promo code 101215. That is 101215 for 15% off of all non-sale items. That is good as long as we keep giving you this ad. So head on over to the website, www.charliehustle.com. Use that promo code, get you some awesome merch, and get on with your day. Maybe you can get it with another Big 12 team if you're a fan. Woof. All right. We're in the closing stretch here. I think I can keep all the rest of this within 10 minutes. Wow, surprised I made it this far. West Virginia. This is going to be an interesting game. This is one that we marked at the beginning of the season as probably a 50-50 toss-up, but is likely, if West Virginia really starts to kick it into gear, it's going to be a tough game. I think the pressure has kind of come off a little bit of the Bearcats, and the pressure is going to flip onto West Virginia here, just because of the point in their season. Neil Brown is, played his way off of the hot seat last year, as effectively played his way back onto it. And I think the outcome of this game is going to be very important for that conversation going forward. But it's going to be interesting. From what I've heard, Garrett Green is not going to be playing in this game. So your starting quarterback, who was a potential Heisman at the very beginning of the season, never ended up amounting to that. Out for this game, that's going to be a huge change in what the trajectory of this game is supposed to be. And I think, like I just said, the pressure is on West Virginia to really get this win. I think the pressure is also going to be on Cincinnati. Like, if they're going to be down a QB, if they're going to be in a situation that, you've got to get that 6 game somewhere, and you've got to go into Ames and Manhattan the following 2 weeks. I think you got to go bowling in this game. I think you got to find a way to win this one. And I think that pressure is going to be on you, so that you can just kind of breathe a little bit easier as you walk into the gauntlet the next 2 weeks. With that said, Bearcats 5-point favorites at home in this game. Like I said, in yet another noon game, absolutely sick of it. Absolutely sick of it. I say that as somebody who actually, to this point in the year, has not been to a Bearcats game yet. I like to watch the Bearcats play at night, and I like the fans to enjoy a nip at night. It's our marquee environment. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Just got to make it happen. Maybe this is a sacrifice for getting into the Big 12, is saying goodbye to all of our later games. But we sure as hell get to play night games, just not at Nippert Stadium. Unfortunate. 56.5 over under in this game. I'm not going to do the full Viva La Cash because there's so much going on there, and I am down 2 guys, so I'll just make it quick. I don't know if I would take the Bearcats to cover in this game. The 5 feels tough. I think this is going to be a close game, personally. Even with West Virginia down a little bit, I think they're going to be playing hard just to try to get another win here, and I think it's going to be close. So I would not take the Bearcats to cover. However, I would take the over in this game. I think they're going to have to score some points. You know what? I take that back. Take the under. Take the under. No Garrett Green. Bearcats defense is going to lock down, and as we've learned in Nippert this year, it might be a crapshoot on offense. So maybe look for the under in this one. Like I said, 4-4 for West Virginia at this point. Got to get a win. Bearcats got to go bowling. It is a big game for both teams. So we'll see how this one shakes out, but excited for it. And let's hope for a Bearcats dub. Let's hope for a Bearcats dub. And our last point of the night, we are previewing Morehead State. And I'm going to make this happen in like 3 minutes because it doesn't need to be super long. Of course, Bearcats looking really good to start the season. Can have really no complaints after the end of a 109-54 blowout. But Morehead State, little insight on them. They're ranked 283 in KenPom as it currently stands. First game of the season, they lost 93-45 to Louisville. Pat Kelsey's debut. Kelsey's debut. I just messed it up again. Kelsey's debut with Louisville, and they looked pretty good. Looked pretty good in that game. And Morehead State did not have a lot to offer, and I can tell you this is the reason why. Really slow tempo team. They have a pretty abysmal offense, and a lot of that, similarly to what we experienced and had with UAPB, lost a lot of their roster. Of course, some of these guys transferred out, some of these guys graduated, but Morehead State only returning about 3 to 4 guys. None of them are in their top 5 scorers, and I think even their 6th ranked scorer was averaging like 5 or 6 points a game, and that is their top returner of offensive production. So really lackluster or offense. Not going to expect much. Their defense about middle of the pack, but about as good as I guess you could expect for an OVC team. They were a tournament team last year, which I think is why you see a lot of these guys going elsewhere, and ended up playing, I believe it was Illinois in the tournament. Interesting team that could maybe be good once they get to their conference play, but likely is just going to end up, hopefully, fingers crossed, in another blowout for the Bearcats. And just for reference, I mentioned it before, Bearcats in Ken Palm, guys, 15. This stuff feels good. Like last year, we were just sitting in that like bubble, like top 25, 30. We're hoping to crack the top 10 on this thing this year and really start working. Bearcats are currently ranked 29th in Ken Palm offense, and 13th overall in defense. Those are some great numbers, and especially if that defense can hold up throughout at least non-conference and hopefully in the Big 12 play, especially with the rebounding ability. This team is going to do some damage this year, hopefully damage in the Big 12. But again, as it currently stands, I think at this point, recording on a Wednesday night, Morehead State just finished their game. Literally just finished their game a few minutes ago, beating Boyce. Not even sure. They don't even have a logo. Something less than 1 or 2 school, 89-48. Found a way to score. Their top returning scorer, or top scorer from their first game, and now going into their second game, you have Tyler Brelsford. Sorry, cannot say their names properly. You don't know what you're going to get. It's like UAPB. It's going to be interesting. Kenny White Jr. Had 14 points in the first game. Bresfeld, like I just said, in this game had a grand total of 16. So don't know what you're going to get. You might have some dynamic scoring, but ultimately I think the Bearcats are probably going to do another big blowout. Probably be a little bit tighter than the last game, but I would imagine if I were to give an open prediction right now, I'm going to say like 57-89. That's my prediction. 57-89. We'll see how all that nets out. But that is my preview. Like I said, I'm going to finish all that out, and I'm going to get out of here because I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk. One voice for a long time sounds miserable. But you're listening to Viva La Cats, and here we are. So with that said, we are a 1012 network podcast. We are always providing you weekly coverage of the Bearcats. So if you're not already, make sure to check out our show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you might listen. Share us with your friends. And of course, check out our TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere else. We post some of our reels and clips from the show. If you're not already watching the show on YouTube. So kudos to you. And if you're on YouTube, leave us a like. Really appreciate it. Final reminder of the night. We just finished up election day yesterday. It's a relief. We don't have to hopefully hear about too much more politics for any point of time. Just a general reminder. Be nice to people. Be good to people. No matter what the results are, it doesn't matter. Be nice to people and just be a genuinely good person. That's what we all like, and that's what we hope for as a society to move forward. Just be nice. That's all we need. So, with that said, thank you for listening to this week's show. Again, a 1012 Network show. Head on over to 1012 Network at or on X and Twitter. Give them a follow and check out the rest of the great content from the other Big 12 shows. And as always, thank you to our sponsors, Charlie Hustle, for providing us some great merch. That's all I got for you. Take it easy. Go Bearcats. Let's get another dub for football, and let's get another one for basketball. Viva la Cats.